Investigators were plagued for decades by the shocking death of 6-year-old beauty queen JonBenet Ramsey. However, the riddle might potentially be resolved thanks to innovative DNA technology. And nobody was expecting the truth. According to those closest to the case, the police are only one step away from permanently closing it, and new information has emerged that has the potential to change everything. Will justice be done at last, though? And why the JonBenet Ramsey riddle has now been solved after all these years, and what actually happened that night? It's not good, just so you know. New DNA technology has rekindled hope in the case of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey's murder, which occurred more than 28 years ago. Before delving into it, though, let's travel back 28 years to the startling case that rocked the government and media. The Ramsey family's vacation plans were turned into a nightmare when it all began in December 1996. 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey was discovered dead in the basement of her family's Colorado home on December 26. In addition to an autopsy finding a fracture in her skull, she was discovered with a garrote, a strangulation device, implanted in her neck. Additionally, a ransom note stating that she had been abducted and that $118,000 was required to restore her was left there. However, her body had always been in the basement. When her father learned she was missing, he alerted the police, who searched for her for many hours before finding her body in the basement. Suspicion was cast on the family as he shockingly carried her up in tears. There was a lot of conjecture because of the strange ransom note and the absence of evidence of forced entry. The media was heavily interested in the case, and the crime scene was also poorly protected. The Ramsey family was the case's primary suspect for a long period. The FBI's CODIS database received mixed male DNA that was taken from JonBenet's underwear in 2003 and did not match any Ramsey family members. Boulder's district attorney openly backed the family's 2008 exoneration, which was further bolstered by these DNA results. Furthermore, despite initial errors at the scene, unidentified male DNA traces were found on several things, such as the blanket and the garrote, indicating the killer's physical interaction with the crime scene. Labs can now extract useful characteristics from these previously examined samples thanks to modern technologies. Forensic genetic genealogy, which blends consumer genealogical databases with DNA profiling, is responsible for the significant advancement. The identification of the Golden State Killer in 2018 was made possible by this approach, which raised hopes that it will also be applied in the Ramsey case. Using the newest labs that can produce genealogy-ready profiles, John Ramsey, JonBenet's father, has repeatedly advised the police to retest crucial pieces of evidence, including the ransom note, garrote, flashlight, and underpants. The family of JonBenet's claims that the police have all they need to wrap up the investigation after all these years. The Ramsey family has held on to the belief that the authorities already possess the crucial evidence required to solve the JonBenet Ramsey case for almost 30 years. The girl's father, John Ramsey, has insisted on using contemporary DNA testing methods to identify the murderer, saying that law enforcement has the proof. For roughly 90 minutes in January 2025, John Ramsey met with Boulder Police Chief Stephen Redfern and a genetic genealogy specialist to examine the use of these technologies for retesting the artifacts from the crime scene. Despite the years that have gone by, Chief Redfern and other officials have now stated that they are willing to work with the FBI and independent labs to solve the case. John also mentioned that they ought to use genealogical DNA, which has a 60 to 70% chance of identifying the case's culprit. Institutions conducting investigations have shown some hesitancy, particularly in light of the issue of evidence contamination, which has caused the probe to be prolonged over time. However, officials continue to put new testing procedures into place, gaining support from new leadership and public pressure sparked by recent films. JonBenet's older half-brother, John Andrew Ramsey, has also come forward with a firm belief that this matter may be resolved. He underlined that volunteers continue to work on the issue every day because they have faith that it will be resolved in the end. John Andrew recently talked openly about the family's personal history in an interview. They had to deal with their sister Beth's previous death in a car accident and their mother Patsy's stage 4 cancer diagnosis. They never thought their family would experience another terrible catastrophe. When the world came to believe that they were involved in the M*****A, they were already grieving the loss of their sister. "We lost our sister and our daughter," he stated. "We were the victims, and the same individuals we believed would intervene to defend and assist us were accusing us. Before our lives abruptly turned upside down, we were simply ordinary individuals. John Andrew also disclosed that the family was finally exonerated in 2008 following 10 years of self-defense. He asserts that the pressing necessity for law enforcement to identify the appropriate suspect and begin the prosecution while utilizing contemporary forensic capabilities is still present. The police already have the crucial untested DNA and evidence to eventually solve the mystery, according to both Ramseys, but they must take immediate action. However, what about the viewpoint of JonBenet's other brother, a key suspect? Burke Ramsey, JonBenet Ramsey's brother, made waves by appearing in a 3-part interview on Dr. Phil after being silent for almost 30 years. Since the incident in 1996, this was his first public remark. He turned down offers from Netflix and other documentaries, as well as any interviews. Burke's response to the question of why he eventually spoke was, "If the story is going to be told, I want to tell it. I don't want my name to be mentioned. I prefer to narrate my own story." His remarks highlight his wish to take back the story following years of media attention. In contrast to what the media had reported when the matter initially surfaced, Burke adamantly denied using any object to hurt his sister during the interview. His response was unambiguous. Not at all. He revealed that he stayed in bed the morning of the disaster because he believed his sister was hiding. His police interrogations were also included in the interview. Burke was 9 years old and afraid and perplexed. Because of his anxiousness, he would smile when the police were questioning him, which they mistook for guilt. However, he clarified that it was an anxious reaction and a sense of unease. Dr. Phil led Burke through the 911 call during the interview, playing tapes that had never been played before, asking him why he stayed in bed while the family and police were downstairs, and sharing his startling conclusion that his sister had passed away permanently. Burke, however, has put up his own view regarding the matter in the hopes that it will ultimately be resolved. He thought his sister's death was caused by a pedophile or predator who was infatuated with pageants, not by his family. He expressed optimism that the case will be resolved in the end, particularly in light of the most recent DNA findings. The Ramsey family is no longer the suspects in this 3-decade-old case, thus it appears that he is correct. The original police obsession with John and Patsy Ramsey as the main suspects in the JonBenet Ramsey case was one of the most peculiar elements of the case. Because there were no indications of forced entry, investigators paid close attention to the family. Coincidentally, the ransom note mentioned John's recent bonus and was written on home stationery. All other feasible leads, including those that suggested potential intruders, were disregarded and neglected due to the police investigation's tunnel vision. They would have likely had more credible suspicions if they had broadened their search, particularly in the way of a potential predator or insane admirer, but they didn't, and the case went on for 28 years. Finally, using the most recent DNA technology, the enigma is nearly resolved. Given that JonBenet was initially hit by a large item that broke her skull before being strangled with a garrote, the parents' position as the primary suspect was not as secure as it first appeared. Her parents are unlikely to have killed her in such a heinous manner. In fact, the parents were almost sent to jail for child endangerment and accessory charges, but DA Alex Hunter declined to file charges, citing insufficient evidence. Joe Berlinger, the documentary filmmaker who filmed Cold Case, JonBenet Ramsey, stated in an interview. Following the discovery of male DNA belonging to an unidentified person in 2008, which completely exonerated the Ramseys, criticism grew. The family was eventually officially cleared by former DA Mary Lacy, who claimed that they were the victims of this crime. She added that because the police were primarily concerned with establishing the guilt of the family, they had disregarded crucial evidence that pointed against the Ramseys. By 2013, detectives had uncovered unmistakable evidence of an unidentified male presence in the house, leading them to disclose that their primary line of investigation was an intruder theory. Because they were primarily focused on the family at the time, they were unable to investigate the more than 1,600 potential persons of interest, which included local burglars, registered sex offenders, and pageant links. In addition to their intense attention on the parents, the investigators also had suspicions about JonBenet's brother, Burke Ramsey, who was just 9 years old at the time. DA Alex Hunter subsequently stated that Burke Ramsey was not and never had been a suspect, even though he was formally thrown out as a suspect. Still, he was suspected by many. Even the press. The Case of JonBenet Ramsey is a documentary series that was shown by CBS in 2016. After a dispute over a pineapple, CBS specialists came to the conclusion that Burke, then 9 years old, may have mortally injured his sister by accidentally striking her with a flashlight. They cited Burke's behavior in interviews and a previous incident in which he struck her with a golf club as proof. Given that Burke's fingerprints were discovered on a bowl and a teacup, the pineapple idea served as the primary piece of purported proof. JonBenet's stomach was discovered to contain an undigested pineapple. Experts from CBS speculate that this may have been her last moment. They also mentioned how composed and happy he was while being questioned by the cops. Burke and his family, however, have vehemently refuted these allegations. He retaliated by suing Werner Spitz, a pathologist, and CBS for defamation, resulting in private settlements. Burke firmly stated, "You won't find any evidence because that's not what happened," in a rare public declaration. He informed Dr. Phil that he thinks his sister was murdered by an intruder who was infatuated with pageants. Some people still think the Burke did it theory is believable. Others think he actually strangled his sister after striking her, while others claim he was too young to commit such a crime. That the incident was fabricated by his parents to keep him safe. What are your thoughts? Please share your opinions in the comments section. One of the primary issues with the JonBenet Ramsey case was that the parents were given too much attention, yet the entire inquiry was ruined by the contaminated crime scene. Only JonBenet's bedroom was guarded when the police came, allowing detectives, friends, and relatives to freely roam the premises. The integrity of forensic evidence was seriously jeopardized by cleaning surfaces, handling evidence, and even moving JonBenet's body. Rather than alerting the authorities downstairs, her father actually found her dead and dragged her up from the basement. Additionally, the officers' inquiry was conducted using subpar protocols. Hours after the 911 call, her father discovered JonBenet in the basement, which they had overlooked. They did not immediately seal off the entire site or call in crime scene dogs. Additionally, the event happened during Christmas, when departments were understaffed and there was confusion. Former police chief Mark Beckner said that the mishandling of the situation led the inquiry in the wrong direction. To make matters worse, important objects like the flashlight, rope, ransom note, and garrote have not been subjected to contemporary forensic retesting, and some may be missing or untested. The ransom note is one of the investigation's puzzles that the police have not been able to solve. When Patsy Ramsey found the notorious 3-page ransom note on the stairs on Christmas morning, it wanted $118,000, exactly the same amount as John Ramsey's bonus, raising suspicions of personal knowledge right away. The note was unusually lengthy, formal, and dramatic, with threats of beheading, signatures like SBTC, and movie quotations from Dirty Harry and Speed. It was written on stationery from within the house using Patsy's pen. They doubted its legitimacy since it was so odd, asking if it was put there purposefully to skew the investigation or if it was an attempt to take advantage of John Ramsey's money. The origins of handwriting have long been disputed by experts. Some people connected it to Patsy. Others said it was written by a criminal imposter. Jason Jensen, a Utah private investigator, hypothesized that SBTC might be referring to academic jargon, such as that used by University of Colorado Boulder students, implying a local intruder. It is dismissed by psychological profilers as a fake kidnapping message written to divert investigators. Linguistic specialists point out that the strange wording is contradictory with actual kidnappers and suggest that you should get some rest. The police looked at further crime scene clues in addition to the ransom note. There was some evidence at the crime site despite its contamination. The brothers and father of JonBenet think that the evidence can be re-examined by the authorities and used to ultimately solve the mystery. Investigators discovered a suitcase under the window, leaves and packing peanuts within, and an open basement window with a scuff mark underneath, all of which suggested possible intruder access. No family member's high-tech boot print found close to JonBenet's body matched. Additionally, a makeshift garrote, a nylon cord knotted around a paintbrush handle from Pazzi's Art Supplies, was discovered strangling JonBenet. There was also a rudimentary ligature on her wrist that matched. Additionally, there was a lot of DNA, more than you might anticipate for a case that had been unsolved for so long. Male DNA that didn't match the Ramseys was found in a number of locations, including under her fingernails, underpants, garrote, long johns, and wrist. cord. However, they have yet to identify the owner of the DNA. Other trace evidence was also found. On the door of the wine cellar was a palm print. A latex glove was discovered in the surrounding trash, duct tape over her mouth was from an unknown source, and fibers of green Christmas garland were discovered in her hair. The media was occupied with examining every move made by the police as they attempted to investigate the murder of JonBenet Ramsey and slandering the family. The murder trial of JonBenet Ramsey swiftly shifted from serious journalism to a televised trial. Instead of concentrating on factual facts, the majority of cable news and tabloids sensationalized the tragedy in order to increase their ratings. Notably, Pazzi and John Ramsey were theatrically convicted before a court ruling in Geraldo Rivera's 1997 pretend trial on The Geraldo Rivera Show, obscuring entertainment and presumptive conviction. Later, Rivera apologized in public for the damage. By making outrageous accusations, tabloids further demonized the family. That JonBenet had misbehavior and that Patsy coerced him into pageants, but these were eventually proven to be untrue. Burke Ramsey, who was only 9 years old at the time, was even in the spotlight, and his anxious responses were depicted as grins that suggested guilt. Critics and journalists like Michael Tracy have denounced the coverage as a media assassination and public lynching, pointing out how unsubstantiated rumors trumped facts. Infringement of the presumption of innocence. Critics claim that the constant attention paid to the Ramsey family distorted public opinion, transforming a tragedy into a show and significantly fostering an atmosphere that allowed injustice to flourish. Notwithstanding all of the difficulties, the Ramsey family has persevered in growing and succeeding in other areas of their lives while simultaneously trying to unravel the mysteries surrounding JonBenet. John Ramsey is still the most ardent supporter of solving his daughter's murder case. JonBenet's mother, Patsy, died in 2006, but he continues to advocate for further DNA testing and urge the government to look into his daughter's death again. He lives in Michigan and Utah, married his third wife, Jan Rousseau, in 2011, and still has faith that justice will be served by outside specialists in contemporary forensic techniques. Burke Ramsey, who has maintained a low profile in the public eye and is currently employed in Michigan as a software engineer, graduated from Purdue University with a degree in computer and information technology. He is married and leads a secluded life with little exposure to the public. In 2016, he spoke out about Dr. Phil after declining to appear in the Netflix documentary series, endorsing the intruder theory and defending himself. JonBenet's half-brother from his first marriage is John Andrew Ramsey. He has been an outspoken supporter of cracking the case, made an appearance in the Netflix documentary series, and continuously calls for a DNA-focused inquiry while criticizing police conduct. Now, the whole family is working to make sure the police get new DNA evidence and eventually identify JonBenet's true killer. It appears that the authorities just need to retest the DNA and provide the Ramsey family with some answers now that everything is finally falling into place. Which theory regarding the murder of JonBenet do you believe to be more plausible? Tell us in the comments section. We appreciate your time and hope to see you again soon.